top 25, under 25 cornerstone rankings. Some of your favorite players at every single position outside of the quarterback position. Let's not waste any more time. Zach, take us to your first tier.
All right, first tier, I don't think we should spend too much time on, but there's some technicalities to a video like this. I'll just say, if someone is 25 or older, so if they're 25, they're not on the list. So, like CeeDee Lamb, he's still a cornerstone player, but he just doesn't make the list. Jalen Waddle, Jefferson. Okay, so...
But you get people that say, like, oh, but he's only, like, 2 months outside of 25. Like, no, he's out. He's over.
We got to find a cutoff age somewhere, guys. All right, tier 1's Jamar Chase and Amon-Ra St. Brown. We recently talked about them in a video. I have them in the same tier in regular rankings. It doesn't make sense to not have them in the same tier in Cornerstone as well. Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jamar Chase have both, in the last 2 years, had a season where they averaged over 20 points per game. They're their clear number one weapon on their offense. Connected to quarterbacks that we like long-term. Amon-Ra just got the big contract extension. I'm sure Jamar Chase will as well. These guys are like, you know... If you're building a team around wide receivers, these are some of your favorite guys to have.
Sure. And let's go to your tier 2 because I do my rankings as well when you do this.
Yeah.
I did have somebody else in here, so let's take us to your tier 2. Okay. Maybe we can have a conversation.
Yeah, tier 2 is huge.
Okay.
Lots of players. So I'll just start with Marvin, Puka Nacua, and then I think there's a little run of running backs, and I really think we should focus less on the ranking number and more on the tier. All these guys I would put in the same category.
Sure.
So like Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, Breece Hall, and then 2 more with Garrett Wilson and Malik Neighbors. This is a big tier, but I feel like these are all elite dynasty assets that you can build around. And with the running backs, you know, do you prefer Bijan? Do you prefer Garrett Wilson? Do you prefer Jahmyr Gibbs, Malik Neighbors, Breece Hall, Malik Neighbors? It just depends on, I guess, how you're building your team.
Sure.
You can make an argument that those 3 names, Bijan, Gibbs, and Breece, they are at a position that's more difficult to find. It's hard to find young running backs who can average 16 to 20 points per game in a season, who have that kind of draft capital, that kind of commitment from a team. Whereas, obviously, Malik Neighbors, Garrett Wilson, Puka Nacua, these are assets, wide receivers that you can build around long term, and we don't really have as many concerns around, well, what happens if they tear their ACL or, you know.
Sure.
The running back position is just injured so much, so I think you can make a case for any one of these names. But yeah, so who would you have had in tier 1 that I didn't have then?
So I had the conversation to Martin Harrison Jr. being in this tier 1, and the only reason why I would say this is because of the foundational, I guess, commitment on the team specifically. So I feel really comfortable putting Martin Harrison with my projections and understanding how he is hopefully going to be playing out in his career with the quarterback and Kyler Murray. Now, I know the biggest argument will probably say, well, if you have Martin Harrison there, maybe Malik Neighbors should be there. But Malik Neighbors' situation is completely different, specifically with Daniel Jones. So I guess if I'm looking at the bigger picture, I can understand why you have Marvin and the likes of Malik or Garrett Wilson in the same tier, where for me, Martin Harrison as a talent and situation feels like he is deserving of the projections of tier 1. But that's kind of where I was at looking at my tiers with tier 1.
I just find it difficult.
It's a little bit of a reach for sure.
He hasn't played at all.
I know, exactly.
Yet. And if I was to put Marvin in tier 1, I'd be looking at Puka Nacua being like, well, that's the best rookie season ever from a wide receiver. And I have them in 2 different tiers. I couldn't do it in for me, but I can understand it. Obviously, it wouldn't surprise me at all if that's where Marvin is for me this time next year.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of
in a very good situation.
I think that's kind of where I was thinking. I was like, okay, obviously I'm looking at this year, but trying to envision that next year cornerstone rankings and maybe where that can also be trying to get ahead of the curve, a little bit, just so I can like have a little pat myself on the back, as you will.
Sure.
But yes, I can definitely agree here with Martin Harrison being in tier 2 for sure.
I was looking at this tier 2 and I was asking myself, what player has the most risk in this tier? And to me, I think that player is actually Garrett Wilson. Oddly enough, I don't know how you would answer that question, but just with it being, his 3rd year now, he's had a high amount of targets. He's a very good player, dominating target share on his team.
Yeah.
But if Aaron Rodgers can't give us a healthy season, or if he's not the same player post Achilles, then I have a feeling Garrett Wilson's value could be kind of shot. Not to the point where he's going to be, really bad, but I'm just thinking more DJ Moore when he was in Carolina. Like, oh my God, such a high percentage of the target, such a talented player, first round pick, Ohio State. But is there ever going to be a quarterback to support that? So I think there is a wide range of outcomes, and I think he could be a volatile player. He will either cement himself as an elite asset, or if he has another like top 30 season, I think people will be like, all right, what expectations should we set for this player now? Okay. And that's not to say that he's not capable. I think he's capable of finishing as the wide receiver 1 if things go right with Aaron Rodgers. But I just think there's a wide range of outcome. Who would you say is the riskiest player in tier 2 in your mind?
I would agree with Garrett Wilson. I would probably say Malik Neighbors, and that's just because of the quarterback play. Malik Neighbors, out of everyone in this tier, has the worst quarterback play. With Daniel Jones. And I love Malik Neighbors, and I love that he's on my team. But if Daniel Jones is not the guy that we all expect him to be, then I guess there's new hope going into 2025 if they do get another quarterback, or they stay with Daniel Jones and he's kind of like a Garrett Wilson stuck with a bad quarterback play. And it's like, well, the talent is there. It's elite. And we're going to continue to hold on to that hope like we are doing with Garrett Wilson currently.
That's actually the comparison I was going to make, though. Like, I actually feel like Neighbors is kind of safe because we know how talented he is. And we know the draft capital. And we just saw Garrett Wilson's value not really dip at all with 2 relatively mediocre seasons on a points per game basis. Well, but yeah, I can definitely understand people's concerns.
I might feel the same way with maybe somebody that's in your tier 3. So take us through that then.
Let's talk about it. Tier 3, 4 names in this tier: Drizzy, Drake London, Chris Olave, Rome Odunze, and then Sam Laporta. I'll be honest, it does feel wrong having Garrett Wilson a tier higher than Drake London.
Okay.
But I just think Garrett Wilson has been in a situation, and yes, the offenses are changing, and they're changing still. Amen. Come on. But we've seen Garrett Wilson in a situation where he's already demanded 150 plus targets in a season. And obviously from a target share perspective, we've seen Drake London average around 25% of the target share in the last 2 years. But Garrett Wilson, we've seen it already. He's had 168 targets in a season, which was last year. So I just think, though, like, obviously targets are everything, rather, in fantasy. So, but love Drake London. Rome Odunze, a guy that I'm willing to wait on. I don't think this is an exact JSN situation. One, they're different players. Rome Odunze can play on the outside pretty easily. But I do think I have low expectations. Like, I have more like a top 40 finish expectation for Odunze this year, whereas a guy like Neighbors, I expect him to finish top 20. There's just different expectations. There'll be a different amount of target share and competition around those 2 names. And then Sam Laporta, I just wanted to let you guys see how my cornerstone rankings would look if it was a tight end premium league. So in today's video, it's a 0.5 tight end premium in these rankings that I've put. So that's the tier 3 there.
Okay. Yeah, let's talk about Rome and let's talk about Rome first, okay? Because I agree with you when you say the situations are different. I think a lot of people are comparing it to Tyler Lockett, Jackson Smith and Jigba, et cetera, et cetera. The difference with that is that Keenan Allen is brand new to this offense, where Tyler Lockett was in that offense for years when Jackson Smith and Jigba came into the league. And I completely agree with Rome Odunze that we need to reevaluate our expectations, but also keep him at a low. I guess if that makes any sense.
By the way, there's a very realistic chance that Keenan Allen has a hamstring injury.
Exactly.
If that happens, then the entire world for Odunze changes.
An older, injury-prone wide receiver going on a new offense normally doesn't automatically click if he is clearly the only guy there, and that's not the case with Keenan Allen. He has Rome Odunze and DJ Moore. And the guy that we were talking about that I kind of mentioned.
Wanted to quickly highlight on that as well. Think about old wide receivers who have changed teams recently. It's been a little bit of a hit and miss, right? Julio, when he went from Atlanta to the Titans, that was a nightmare. And it wasn't all Julio's fault. But outside of Julio Jones, we saw DeAndre Hopkins be successful. But it's very hit and miss between guys at the top of their game. So,
yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah, just wanted to throw that in. I mean, Devontae Adams was great when he switched, but anyway.
The next guy that I want to talk about that I was kind of hinting with that Garrett Wilson narrative that I feel I have been feeling concerned about, and that's Chris Olave. I think the way that you articulated Garrett Wilson and your concerns is the same way I feel about Chris Olave currently. And his situation is far worse. And I do believe we're going to be seeing him, and I kind of been mentioning, I do believe where his current value is outside of the cornerstone rankings. He's currently wide receiver 9 on Keep Trade Cut, if I'm not mistaken, or 9 or 11, excuse me. As that's loading up, I'll tell you. But for me, Chris Olave, I'm a little bit concerned about his situation and what that's going to look like. And I think we can see that identical picture with Garrett Wilson that you painted earlier, and exactly what Chris Olave is kind of going through right now, especially with the quarterback play with Derek Carr. By the way,
I guess
wide receiver 11 on Keep Trade Cut.
Yeah, I was gonna say 9 seems high.
Yeah,
that's why I felt like 11 doesn't feel like what. So he drops to like 14. I don't see him dropping like into the 20s.
I guess example. If you're painting the same DJ Moore picture where he dropped from, because DJ Moore was in the same realm of Chris Olave currently. He wasn't as high as Garrett Wilson, but then he falls down where DJ was, where he was like you said, 14 maybe to 17, 18 wide receiver. Then that feels more realistic based off of his overall situation.
I feel like we've talked about Olave ad nauseum, so I don't want to get too far into it and waste time, because I feel like we've all I'm going to say is I think you undervalue the change at offensive coordinator. Yeah. And you're going to say about Derek Carr. And I get it. Like, Garrett Wilson has a better quarterback, but Garrett Wilson still has Nathaniel Hackett, right? Things have changed foundationally in the Saints offense, even though it's not via the quarterback. And we have seen Derek Carr. He might not be the same quarterback. We've seen him support really good fantasy wide receivers in Amari Cooper, Devontae Adams before. So I think there's just a foundational change to let Olave easier into this offense with easier looks, more slants, more design plays, not so much just chuck the ball down the field and see if it's an accurate pass. So I don't want to spend too much time on it. Just
I agree.
I think our audience is they know exactly where we stand.
I would even say the same thing, just to, I guess, pivot off of Chris Olave for Drake London. Because the same thing could be said with Kirk Cousins, and if Kirk Cousins is not the same, and
off his Achilles,
what if Drake London is not the player that we expected him to be? So much can go through that as well.
If we ask the same question that we asked in Tier 2, who's the riskiest player? I think it's actually Drake London there. Yeah. He has the highest outcome of he could solidify himself as a top 7, top 8 dynasty wide receiver if things go well. But, there wasn't much to stand on from a fantasy points per game or a fantasy finish perspective in the first 2 years. So if he comes out and has a wide receiver 28 finish, then he's going to fall. He's going to fall.
Yeah, exactly.
Because that's obviously a big concern.
Completely.
We're going to go into the next tier. I just wanted to quickly let you guys know that there are now 2 ways for you guys to get your dynasty team reviewed by Badaki and myself on a live stream. The first way, as you know, is by becoming a yearly Mother Flocker member.
That's right.
It's just one of the add-ons of being a member with us on a yearly basis. We think that's the best bang for your buck. The other option now is, doesn't matter what code you use at sign up, or even if you are a member, you can purchase an a la carte review from us on the website. There's 2 links in the description. Check those out. And so many people have been submitting these a la carte team reviews. It's been awesome to see, and it's been really fun to review them. So keep the lights on over here at Dynastyland Football. By the way, I'll put this in the description. We are looking to hire a video editor. If you edit videos and you want to be a part of the team, you're passionate about the NFL and fantasy football, check out the link in the description. It'll say video editor application, and you'll have a link there. But the only reason we can do that, we can potentially hire someone to improve our content, to continue taking the next step for you guys, is because of the support from this community. So we appreciate y'all. Big time.
Take us to your tier 4.
So I just want to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 12, 13, 14, 15. Okay, the next 15 players, I think they're all in the same tier.
Okay.
The next 15 players. So I've got a tier 4A and a tier 4B, but I just want you guys to know that I view all these players in the same exact tier, okay? So we'll start with some tight ends. Again, in a 0.5 tight end premium league, I think this is where we see McBride, Kincaid, and Kyle Pitts.
Okay.
All these guys I feel really good about. Foundational pieces. If you're in a 1 quarterback league, start 7 or 8, you really want one of these top 4 names to build around long term, right? Even if you're in a bigger league, but the premium obviously helps. Then we got some names like Devon Achane, who I feel very good about, but, I don't know if the community is starting to set unrealistic expectations, but I do really, really love this player, and I have from day one. Tank Dell as well, and then Kyron Williams. Kyron Williams, if he is the player that he was last year, and we're all overthinking it, he'll be the biggest steal in Dynasty, in fantasy drafts, point blank, period. Tank Dell, I think Tank Dell has a chance to be the number 1 wide receiver in Houston. Keeping on into tier 4, okay? Because this is the same tier, just 2 different lines. Ken Walker.
Okay.
Running back that I think you can build around long term. Very talented guy, still very young. Zay Flowers, great rookie season, but stuck in an offense that we just don't really know how much volume there will be. And if you look at his splits with and without Mark Andrews, it's a little bit concerning. George Pickens, who I think is the breakout of the year this year. I'm very excited for him. Brian Thomas Jr., very talented rookie wide receiver in round 1 with, Jacksonville. Brock Bowers. I love Brock Bowers. You love Brock Bowers, Badaki. We're not obsessed with his situation.
Yep.
But, of course, we still think he's a very talented name. Then I've got a run of wide receivers here with JSN, Jordan Addison, Lab McConkey, and then Jonathan Brooks, who, if you want to put Jonathan Brooks right by Kyron Williams at the top there, I don't care. It's the same tier. That's what I really, really want people to focus on, is I'm not so concerned of, wow, Trey McBride is 15 spots higher than Jonathan Brooks. No, they're interchangeable at this point.
Sure.
Right? That's how I feel about this group of players here. So good, so much talent. For the most part, really good draft capital outside of names like Kyron Williams and Tank Dell, but talented players who I think can be foundational pieces for your team moving forward.
Okay, since this tier is so big, I want you to give me 3 players, kind of like we've been talking about already with Garrett Wilson, Olave. Mm-hmm. Who are these players that you are concerned about in these 2 tiers here?
Well, I don't want to say so much concerned, but I guess I'll say if things go wrong, they could fall the furthest in rankings. How about that?
Okay, perfect.
And there's some of the players that I love the most. Kyle Pitts. Okay. Kyle Pitts.
Yep, that's
I love Kyle Pitts. I've been team Kyle Pitts for a long time, but I have to recognize if this is the year that he gets Kirk Cousins, a quarterback that we love, and new offensive coordinator, and he still puts up, let's say he finishes tight end 14. It's like, okay, actually, we need to really drastically change expectations. However, with his talent, I think he has a tight end 1 season out there ahead of him. The second player that I would say is another player I'm obsessed with, Jackson Smith and Jigba.
Okay.
I am projecting a breakout for Jackson Smith and Jigba. However, there's an elephant in the room, and it's a small elephant. And that elephant's name is Tyler Lockett. And that elephant may be small, but his heart is large. Okay? Yeah. Now, it's an old elephant. All right, let's stop talking about elephants. But Tyler Lockett's old. Is the age cliff actually going to be there? It's something that I think about. I'm like, all right, is JSN going to be there in 2 wide receiver sets?
Sure.
How long is Lockett going to kind of like, be this cock block for JSN? And then I'd say the third player is probably Kyron Williams.
Okay.
Just if Kyron Williams is actually scaled back, or if Kyron Williams goes down with an injury and Blake Corum just really fills in perfectly.
Okay.
I think there is potential for these 3 players to fall in rankings. But last one I'll add on there, how about Tank Dell? What if Tank Dell is the third man, in that wide receiver room?
Yeah.
I think that would really change the way people view him. So is there a player that you wanted to highlight?
Well, there's 2 players. For me, is Devon Achane. If you guys in the community already know how I feel about him and my concerns. Can he stay healthy? Is his efficiency going to be dropping? And what is that 3-headed monster going to look like with Raheem Mostert and Jalen Wright? My second player would most likely be George Pickens. I understand he's really the only target there, but Russell Wilson is not the same guy. He's going into an offense that is Arthur Smith, and we saw how he was utilizing Drake London and Kyle Pitts. That's a bit concerning when you think of
I get it.
George Pickens in that offense. So I'm very concerned about George Pickens and Devon coming into this year. So I see those guys taking a huge plummet if that is not the expectations that we're hoping for going into by the end of this year.
To give Arthur Smith credit, he was there for AJ Brown in Tennessee, right?
Yeah.
But
what was frustrating about AJ Brown though? He wasn't he wasn't getting you know, the Stephon Diggs targets. He was living off of big boom plays and touchdowns, which was kind of like a Kenny Golladay type vibe. But now AJ Brown, look at him. He's all about targets. Yeah. He's all about he's the Stephon Diggs now, essentially, of the era that we're kind of comparing it to. So very different. But yes, I understand what you're saying.
I guess the hope is that Arthur Smith can realize where he failed. Don't know that historically from Coach Speak Index that's possible, but we'll find out.
Sure.
Last tier, I guess, just guys that I felt were just a tier behind the rest. And I know one player in particular is going to really make people upset, but I got Rashee Rice here, and then Xavier Worthy, Jaden Reed, and Trey Benson to finish off the list here. There are other names that we could have added on there. I actually left off James Cook Badaki because he will be 25 soon. I didn't want people to yell at me if they watch this in a month or two. But Xavier Worthy, I have lower than, Brian Thomas, Ladd McConkey. And I am sitting here willing to accept that the range of outcome for Xavier Worthy is that he is, a top 15 name in Dynasty football. I just don't project Xavier Worthy to step in and be the guy straight away. I know a lot of people are like, this is Tyreek Hill. In my head, I'm like, I never saw Tyreek Hill on film. I never saw that type of player.
Sure.
I saw Hollywood Brown. I saw Deshaun Jackson. And that's still a really good player. But if I picture this offense, and I know there's this whole legal situation with Rashee Rice, I still think this offense funnels through Travis Kelce and Rashee Rice. So I love Xavier Worthy. I think there'll be some huge, big games. But I just don't think he's like this guy that's getting, 7 targets as a rookie in an offense that has a lot of mouths to feed now. So people will hate me for that, but that's just where I stand.
I just resulted for my Kansas City Chiefs projections to all of them just getting an even share. It's really hard to envision these guys. One taking being superior over the other, maybe in weeks, but in a whole season standpoint, I feel like it could be very even throughout the season. With Xavier Worthy being a rookie, potentially being the lowest of the target share because of his first year. So I understand what you're saying when it comes down to tier 5.
And then Trey Benson, I have him below Jonathan Brooks. We made that change pretty quickly after the NFL draft.
We did.
And it's about draft capital for sure, but it's just also about expectations in year one. I think if James Conner, if you told me James Conner is going to get injured in week 5 and he'll miss 5 games, I think I'd have them in the same spot right next to each other. I think Trey Benson would take that job.
Yeah.
And I'm not worried about Trey Benson long term, but I do think James Conner is going to be the guy from day one. If Brooks is healthy, I think he is the guy.
I agree.
From day one in Carolina. So. Yeah,
love the list. Love the list. I guess comment down below, who are you most concerned about? Like we were kind of mentioning this year, that could take a huge plummet outside of the, cornerstone rankings at the end of 2024.
And by the way, most people have Brock Bowers higher than me, so I'm sure we'll get a comment on that. Yeah. Those other 3 tight ends, McBride, Kincaid, and Pitts, I'm just more excited about the offense they're in. I'm more excited about the role I project for them this year. But the last thing I wanted to say is I felt this was the most difficult ranking video to make so far for me, just because from tier 4 onwards, I really found it difficult to differentiate where players should be ranked or what tier they should be in.
Yeah.
So there's this gap of 20 players where I'm like, I don't know how to rank these guys properly. So
I get what you're saying.
Anyway, that's it for today. We appreciate you guys. Hit the like button, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one. All love. Now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, LAND, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh.